Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tea with Tarina. We are.
This is where I'm supposed to go. I'm Tara.
And I'm Sarina, and we are Tarina.
Tarina.
So this is our first Tea with Tarina session, and we're very excited to launch this. It's been a dream, vision, something of ours over the last couple years. Basically, people kept asking us to record our banter, and mostly on road trips. But we won't be on the road for a little bit. So we thought, why not? So here we are. So today is a very special edition of our first edition of Tea with Tarina because today is cake day. So, yay! So I have cake here. I learned very quickly that I don't know how to frost a heart-shaped cake. So half my cake is frosted, and I currently have a piece of the frosted part. My beloved might be a little surprised when he goes into the kitchen and half the cake is not frosted.
Why? Why did you do this? Because he might actually think you intentionally did it that way. And then in which case, try and figure out why. Is there some meaning? Is there duality happening? Cake with frosting.
Maybe.
Cake without frosting.
And so, Tara, do you have your cake with you?
I do have a piece of it. I don't have the whole cake because I already cut into the cake. But here it is with multi-layers.
Ooh.
Here, let me bring it up really close so you can see. So this is a German Black Forest cake that took 3 days of work to create. And it has multiple layers of chocolate cake with cherry kirsch so cherry brandy brushed on, and then all sour cherries, and then a very special whipped cream icing, and then like ground up chocolate on the outside. So it was a process, and it is as good as I expected. In fact, it's better because I kind of wasn't even sure it would work out. And yet here it is, and it's delicious. So yes, I have cake and I have tea. Look,
what kind of tea are you drinking?
I don't know if I can show you this. I can't without spilling it. So mug, look, it's heart-shaped. It's heart-shaped mug. It is a combination of tea. It is Earl Grey and berry.
Ooh, that sounds like a lovely combination of tea.
Mm-hmm.
It's delicious.
It's weird, and then I'm like, maybe, and tea. So tell me about your tea, Sarina.
Well, I currently have an empty tea mug because my tea is brewing in this lovely thing. So I ordered the Warrior Heart tea box when Heather Ash was working with Magic Hour to create tea for the Warrior Heart practice. So my tea is currently brewing, although it looks pretty brewed. So this is my little strainer. Let's see if I can show you, or infuser, I think is the actual. Look at that.
You are so fancy.
So this is Silver Moon tea. And theoretically, if I don't burn my hand, you can just pour it.
Yeah, please don't.
Look at that. I won't. And so freshly brewed tea, and I actually have a kettle over here, so I'm gonna freshen up the water so that more can brew while we're talking.
You're so fancy. I just took a couple tea bags and threw them in a cup and poured some hot water on.
You know,
one of them didn't even have one of those tabs, like, you know, like the fancy tea bags versus the not fancy tea bags, because they have like the extra string with the tab. And when you get the ones that don't have that, you're like, discount tea. Yeah, one of them didn't have a tab, and yet it's still delicious. But yes,
that it's fabulous. I actually haven't been dressed since quarantine started, so I put clothes on. I mean, I'm not walking around naked. I just have been wearing yoga pants and pajamas most of the last 3 weeks. So I put on clothes, and then I got out a fancy mug and fancy tea so that I could feel like a human being again.
And do you feel like a human being? Did it work?
It did. I'm like, why haven't I been getting dressed for the last 3 weeks? This feels great. I might even go for a walk today.
What? I might venture out the door. That's fun.
Yeah.
Hi. Well, your tea sounds very good, but I like mine better, I think.
Have you tried this one?
No, I have not. I have not.
It's pretty delicious.
Is it flavored? Like, does it have like fruity or what are the overtones? Tell me about your tea.
It tastes like a white tea.
Mm-hmm. What does a white tea taste? So you're describing something using words that. So what does your tea taste like? Saying it tastes like a white tea doesn't help me.
I don't know how to describe it unless you've had white tea. So this one time I went to the Dallas Museum of Art. They have late nights, and one of the late night art sessions they had was the art of tea. And so we sat around a table for 30 minutes and sampled different types of tea. And I remember that white tea tasted like this.
Gotcha.
As opposed to oolong or Earl Grey, which are black teas, and not to be confused with green teas, which are green.
Okay, green, hence the name. Yeah, no, the only experience I have with tasting things like that is wine. I've never done a tea tasting, but I've done wine sampling, so you have to like swish your glass. So then you get like the legs, which is the sugar content. See, I learned stuff. And then you have to sniff it, and you're actually supposed to slurp it.
Slurp it?
Yes, you're actually supposed to, yes, slurp your wine because that brings air in at the same time. So, and that brings air at the same time you're drinking your wine, so they come in together. You didn't know that I knew that, did you?
I did not know that. I guess I don't drink enough wine to know that either.
I don't either, but I did go to a wine, and that's actually where I learned I like dark chocolate.
At a wine tasting?
Sorry, no, that's where I learned I liked red wine. Sorry, let me switch that. Because they gave us dark chocolate at the same time.
And with the red wine.
With the red wine. Because before that, I would never ever drink red wine. Couldn't stand the stuff. And then I had dark chocolate with it. And it opened a whole new world. Like, it was true. It was actually really, I was going to say pivotal, but that's really dramatic. Like, it shifted. Big life shift happened. I mean, I think I've still probably had maybe 4 or 5 glasses in my lifetime of red wine, but at least now I'm like open to such things. All because of a piece of dark chocolate. So never underestimate the power
of chocolate. I actually have some chocolate here. I'm not eating it right now, but I'm thinking about eating it. It's called Parliament chocolate. This particular one is from Thailand, and Heather Ash gifted it to me. They're made in small batches from local farms in the country in which they come from, like the beans come from. So this kind was made in a small province in Thailand, where they make cacao beans, and then they add sugar to them, and then you have chocolate. Ooh. It's delicious.
Yes.
It's called Bean to Bar.
Neat.
Parliament chocolate, made in Redlands, California, or the company's based out of Redlands, California. But I digress.
Yes, I think we're going off on silly tangents when we're supposed to be talking about very serious, important things today. I feel like that's true.
Very serious. So today, our topics are around death, facing our fears, and living unconditionally. And part of the reason that we're talking about this today is because today is April 19th, and it is the 7th anniversary of Cake Day. So I've been on several adventures on Cake Day the last few years with you, Tara. But for those of us who have not been on such adventures like climbing Palo Duro Canyon, what would be the backstory to how Cake Day came into being, and why are we celebrating cake today?
Why are we celebrating cake today? Great question. And I'm going to try and like compress this and condense it into something that's fairly short and makes sense. So 7 years. And 7 years ago, I found myself leaving. So it was, a couple days later. But generally, 7 years ago is when I was leaving a detox center that I had spent 36 days in. And it's actually when I had done the last step down of a series of pain medication to, no, not pain medication, of supplemental medication that they had given me to detox off of pain medication. Excuse me, Siri apparently thinks I'm talking to them. No, thank you, darling. It was looking up pain medication. Isn't that helpful? So, Siri, I love you. My Siri, just so you'll know, is an Australian man, in case you didn't hear that. So, regardless, back to cake day. So it was, that's the day that I've chosen to market, because that was the last step when I went from, they had titrated down, and that's the day I had gone from the last little bit to 0. So that's why I picked April 19th. So there's a reason, because it was actually a process that took a better part of a month, the full detoxing process. And so the reason that I chose to celebrate it is because at that point, I didn't know what was going to happen. I was really, really sick. I couldn't climb up the stairs. I mean, and that seems like a strange thing to say, but I couldn't get up the stairs. The reason I had been on the medication was for pain. That was still there. So now I had that, plus I was on this whole detoxing process. And so it was really, really uncomfortable. I'll use uncomfortable because pain sounds such a eek word, but it hurt like hell. And there was a lot to re-navigate and learn. And so I started by climbing the stairs to my room the first day, right? That was my challenge. Can I get up? We had 6 stairs. Can I get to my bedroom? And then I started walking a little bit and building up and building up. And when I got to, I want to say the 1 year mark. Yeah, it was around 1 year. So it was, as I was getting near 1 year, I realized that I really wanted to do something to mark the day. And I really wanted to do something that scared that crap out of me. And the reason I chose that is because that the process of letting go, and I'll use it of letting go of the medications that I had been on and had been on for 15 years, had become a really big and integral part of my life. I mean, there was just, everything was built around them. If I wanted to travel, would I have enough? If I wanted to, so like doing things like moving to Texas wouldn't have been possible. Right. So, and I mean, it wasn't just my life, it was our family life, had a lot to do with it too. So where was I going with this? Anyway, so what happened is, I do know now, fear. We're coming into fear because I was scared of what it would mean to actually switch something, to change it. And it felt easier, which, wow. But then it felt easier to just stay with it. And to not rock any boats, and to just take care of things. So, because I was scared, I was really scared. And, even when I went and the day that my dear, sweet, blessed husband left me in the detox center because he had to leave, right? And he just leave me there. I was terrified. My knees were shaking. I don't think I've ever been that scared in my whole life. Ever. So, I wanted to do something that scared me. So that was the first incarnation. So that year I decided to jump out of an airplane. So that was year 1. And since then, I've just used it as an opportunity to challenge. And now it's become more introspective. So as opposed to something that's like super adrenaline, like, oh, I have to, jump out of an airplane, which was awesome fun. It's really become more introspective now. So what am I putting off in my life? What am I not dealing with? What am I afraid to face? Right, so it's a great opportunity to come do that. The cake portion, which was a stroke of genius, on some friends of mine, actually came in a couple years later. And I had moved to Texas and barely knew anybody. I think I maybe knew like 4 or 5 people, dear sweet Sarina included. So she was one of the helpers of the stroke of genius of Cake Day. And when I spoke with some friends at home too, because what happened is all of a sudden I was wanting to have this feeling of celebration, this feeling of like acknowledging something, of taking a look at it, and everybody was all spread out. So how was that going to happen? And then a bunch of different little pieces happened, and suddenly there was like, well, I could have cake, and then other people could have cake, and then we could all have cake together. And it would be so fun. And that's really where Cake Day came from. And that was, I think this is the 4th or 5th actual official Cake Day.
Very official.
very official. I put an official announcement on Facebook. Did you see it said official announcement? It was really
I did
official.
see the official announcement. And I saw people commenting on your page today, or on your profile with Happy
Okay.
Cake Day.
Yes. Cake Day is happening. People are eating cake. And it's such a cool feeling. It fills my heart so beautifully that people want to share in that with me. Like, it makes me feel all warm and tingly and sweet and happy inside. So, all right. So is that, that was a nutshell of Cake Day.
It's a beautiful nutshell of Cake Day. So what is it like to celebrate Cake Day in the middle of a pandemic?
Just throw it in there. So I can't go climb Paladuro Canyon, although technically I think they just actually opened up the state parks today.
So we could go drive again.
If you want to go this afternoon, we could just drive up to Amarillo and go, but I don't think we're going to do that. So it's made
I had
it
to sit in your third row. So we were 6 feet apart in the car.
right. Yes, we would have to distance ourselves, and you would have to wear masks. And I can't imagine climbing something in a mask. That would feel uncomfortable, but it might work. It was interesting because a couple weeks ago I had this momentary, well, it wasn't momentary, it actually lasted quite a bit, of I shouldn't have Cake Day. Cake Day shouldn't be a thing. People are hurting. People are suffering. Life is shifting, and I don't want it to seem like a frivolous thing such as eating cake is what I think is really important. Right? Like, so none of that matters to me. Let's all just have cake and be happy. Right? And I really sat with it because that's not how I feel. And I also thought that eating cake might be a really beautiful way to feel connected to one another when we're not actually in places with folks. So I was really navigating that. And so I kind of threw it out to the broader community, an impromptu Facebook poll. And, I don't know if maybe the people who didn't agree with me just didn't say anything because they didn't, want to be upsetting or something. I don't know, but everybody was in support of it. So
we're eating cake.
We're eating cake today.
What makes me think about that was I think it was right after my mom died. I went twice to get my makeup done. And I had all sorts of feelings about getting my makeup done because I don't really get my makeup done like professionally by people. It seems frivolous, especially at a time when my mom had just died. And I remember sitting with myself and being like, fuck it. Like, I want to go get my makeup done and I want to feel pretty in the midst of, crying spells. And so to think about like finding joy even in those really dark times, or even in spite of, everything that's happening, or in addition to, like, moving beyond, we have to only hold one emotion at a time. And like, what does that feel like, or why does that need to be the way, right? Last night, actually, I had this really interesting experience where I was simultaneously laughing at like the ridiculousness of something and crying because I was exhausted and couldn't believe what was happening. And I don't mean like 2 minutes and 2 minutes, like simultaneously, I was experiencing this, all of these emotions, right? Like simultaneously holding them. And I let go of the need for it to look a particular way. And I was just like, this is where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a beautiful, I think, expression of living unconditionally. And I think that going through really difficult times, whether that's detox or the death of a mother or just like facing our shit on a day-to-day basis, but there's this spaciousness that I think you and I in particular have been able to experience together as a result of our work in the Toltec world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just like, how do we live that way,
It was interesting when So I'll give a little bit of, I'm going to out myself here totally, guys, that are watching. So this was originally, and probably still, is entitled Toltec Tea with Tarina, because it's more of a longer an alliteration, and alliterations are awesome. Just, you know. So anyway, it was Toltec Tea with Tarina. And so when we decided to do this, been pretty busy with work stuff lately. And I thought, oh, let's put a graphic together. And I didn't put the word Toltec on it. I just put tea with Tarina. And I thought it was really cute. And I put a little teacup for the eye dots. And I was really excited. And I'm like, here. And then Sarina put the webinar thing together. And she's like, is this the final version? Right? Is it done? And I'm like, yes, it's done. You know, it's as done as it's getting right now. And then she's like, well, because she had put Toltec in the original. And she wanted it to match. I'm like, oops. So the official longer title is Toltec Tea with Tarina. So I started thinking about facing fears, and what would the Toltecs teach about this? So I got really esoteric about perception and fear being perception.
Can you also just give like a brief introduction of what Toltec is for those viewers in our audience who may not be familiar with the Toltecs?
What is Toltec? So, okay, can I say this right? So the Toltec were a group of people that came together in South and Central America to study perception. That's a nutshell. So Toltec means artist of the spirit. Did I get that right? I did, right? I'm right. Please nod if I'm doing any of this wrong, Sarina.
South and Central Mexico.
South and Central Mexico. And they came together to study perception. And they were educators and they were scholars. And they built this amazing community and communities across. It was like a great empire of Toltecs. And the lineage that Sarina and I have been studying for bunches of years now is following one of the lineages of the Toltecs. So is that enough of a niche? What else? What else shall we say about our beloved Toltecness?
Well, so Heather Ash
the teachers
Amara is our teacher, and she studied and taught, or is teaching, with Don Miguel Ruiz and his sons, Don Jose and Don Miguel Jr., lovingly known as Mikey. And we've had the pleasure of studying with them as well in different settings over the last couple years. But yeah, so they are our teachers. And Jenny Gentry is also a lovely Toltec teacher that we study with occasionally in Santa Fe. She has a beautiful retreat center called the Garden of the Goddess.
Oh, it's so gorgeous.
It's amazing. It feels like home. And so, yeah, so those are the Toltecs. Okay, moving along. Fear. What would the Toltecs say?
What would the Toltecs say? I don't know that I have an answer. It was just a question that I was pondering. What, am I supposed to have the answer? So what would a Toltec say? So instead of like, what would Jesus do? What would a Toltec say? But I think it's about perception, right? So fear and loss, and I mean, everything is perception. So then I started with this whole mind trip of, well, if it's perception, can I shift it? And the answer is yes. Now, have I shifted it? No. I still get scared crapless of things. So I'm a Toltec student, right? So I'm working on shifting my perception. However, I'm still in a human, body and have all kinds of human things happening, and I still get scared. But it is this really beautiful, for me anyway, it's a comfort to know that it actually can be shifted if one wants it to be. I mean, maybe, and there's certain probably things I don't want to shift, right? Like I want to be afraid of things or be respectful, and maybe not fearful, but respectful of things that seem like they would do me harm.
Like
right?
poison ivy.
Right, or that train barreling down the track.
Oh, yes.
Right, I want to be, if I'm standing on the track, that I feel fear to get my ass off the track, right? So I don't want to say like, oh, I just want to change all of my fearful perceptions out. Like, oh, right? I think it's more about how can I take that fear and using my perception of what it means and its definition, use it to serve me instead of use it to spin stories and harm myself with.
Hmm. That knife that we grab and stab ourselves with.
Right.
That's the image I've seen quite a few times for myself around fear is like I'm taking the knife and I'm stabbing myself with it. And one of the things that I love about the fact that we're both firewalk instructors is that frequently we get to use fear in the face of the fire. I've had quite a few people ask me, are because you're a firewalk instructor and you've walked on fire hundreds of times, um, you must not be afraid of the fire any longer. And I laugh, like cackle almost, because of course I'm afraid or respectful in a very mindful way of the fire. It's fire.
It's fire.
It's real fire. And so there's a very real, I would say, animal part of me that's like, fire burns and you're gonna like burn your feet or whatever. Or you're too close at this juncture and there's a backdraft or whatever happens, But what I love about the firewalk teachings is that we can use our fear as energy because that's all there is, right? Is energy. And so if that energy is fear, and it's moving through us, how do we direct that with our will, with our intent, and be able to move through the obstacles in our lives? Because that's all they are, right? Our firewalks over and over and over again.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Bless the firewalks. It's true. I mean, it's funny every single time. Every single time. I mean, so far. I mean, I can't predict into the future. But every single time so far, and I mean, I've crossed the coals many times, I feel my feet glued to the ground. They're like stuck. They're like, no, we're not doing this. Right. And I feel it. And I feel that fear. And it's similar to the fear I felt 7 years ago as I was standing there in the medical office as they were admitting me for this treatment that I had no idea was going to happen. And everything in my body was screaming, run from this building, run from this building as fast as you flippin' can, because this is not good, right? This is going to suck, and this is going to suck so bad. And you don't even have a concept yet of how bad it's going to suck. At least I didn't know that then, right? Grateful then I didn't actually know what was ahead of me completely. And it's the exact same thing. It's a different scale with the firewalk, but it's the same thing. It's like, wow, I see you, fear. But what I want is so much greater. My desire to get to the other side of this coal bed, my desire to change the way I'm living my life or to shift something or to, move something or to have clarity or to have peace, whatever that is so much greater than my fear. And that's what kept me standing there. And then it's the same thing. That's what helps me cross the coals. My desire to get to that other side. Even though I don't really know what's going to happen between now, here, and there. I don't know.
And I think that's the trick to unconditional living. It's that willingness to go in, not knowing. We don't know what's going to happen in the middle. We don't even know what's going to happen at the end. We just know that we're willing to take that first step and see and open to what's possible, to play, right, with what's possible. When we say yes. The thing that happened to me last night was that I was really upset about something, and I was scared that if I brought it to my beloved that he was going to be like, wow, you're an irrational human being and I don't know what the fuck's going on now. And I sat with it for a brief moment, and I committed this year to being honest in my communication and to be really direct, to not do what I've done historically, which is live conditionally around my own conditions of not making upset, avoiding conflict, really just avoiding at all costs because it might be uncomfortable. And so I said, hey, can we talk? And went through this upset moment. And in the moment, it just like came out, and I was like, I cannot believe this is happening right now. I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, that my expression is happening. And as soon as it dissipated, which was probably like 10 or 15 seconds, my beloved just looked at me and he was like, yeah, you're right. I'll do it tomorrow. And then that was the end. And I was like, oh, okay. And there was this moment where I could feel an agreement shatter,
Okay.
because the story I was telling myself before that was, if I do this thing, the conditions are you'll be unloved, you won't be wanted, you'll be left alone, all of those types of things. And I found over and over and over again this year, as I've shown up in my clear communication, as I've shown up in my directness, I'm really unlearning a domestication. I'm unlearning a bunch of agreements that I've had and really dissolving them, to learn how to live unconditionally, so that I don't have these parameters around, if I do this, I won't be loved, or if I do this, I won't be seen, or I won't be liked, or whatever other agreements I have around those. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. How does it feel though making that shift? Right. So bringing
Scary as fuck.
I'm gonna say scary as fuck, right? Because it's different, and I think because it's, especially if we get used to. I mean, you can speak for yourself. Obviously, I'm not even going to attempt to speak for you. But for me, when I'm making a shift, like anything like that, when you're making a shift and you're letting go and you're saying goodbye to something else that felt really comfortable. It could have been messy. It could have been terrible. It could have impacted on all kinds of negative ways. But man, I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
I know this messy. I know what that feels like. And I have to say goodbye to it. Oh, I have to let it go. I essentially have to let it die.
I was about to say, it's like a death, right?
It's like it is death.
Bye-bye.
Bye, I love you. Yeah, it seems so. Bye-bye. That's all. It's that simple, right? Oh, bye-bye. Ta-ta. No, it's more like, you can't leave me. No. And I'm holding
it's like clawing onto it. Don't leave.
You can't leave. But I know you.
We're intimate best friends.
We are the bestest of besties. We were supposed to have lunch together every single day. And now I have to like navigate without you,
mm-hmm.
in a world that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's scary as fuck. Dude.
And there's this way that like leaning into that fear and just like meeting it, right? And there are probably days where I've had that same feeling sense, but didn't follow through, because it was more comfortable to stay in the, I know what to do when I'm just managing my own stuff and I'm not talking about it. Like I'll resent it for a little bit, and that'll build a little bit, and eventually I'll get over it, because I went to a week-long retreat and screamed and threw rocks and did all of the things. But it was very different to hold the fear in the moment and do it anyways.
Yeah.
And to hopefully know.
How do you feel afterwards? How did it feel?
It felt really good. So it felt really scary in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as it was like over, I felt relieved. I did feel a little confused. Okay. So this was fascinating to watch the aspect of me that was like, wait, what just happened? That wasn't how we've done things before, nor is it how we imagined things would go if we did go through this thing. And so there's almost this like confusion part of trying to make sense of the story that my fear had created. Why are you still like in the room fine instead of like packed with your shit on the front porch?
And yet that didn't happen. It did not. I would say
stories are so creative.
It's so good. It's such a good story. It's so good. But I mean, not dogging on the stories, because I mean, we come by the stories, I say honestly, but protectively.
Yes.
Right. So, not, I mean, well, I'm dogging on stories kind of a bit because stories kind of get in the way. And we have them for a reason.
Mhm. They keep us safe, or they keep us thinking we're safe.
The illusion. It's
The
magical.
illusion of safety.
I feel like if I say the word illusion, like clouds of like smoke and like whoosh, and some I don't know, fairy music should happen.
We should get a fog machine.
Like Tinkerbell, the Tinkerbell. And like have stars just shoot across. I wonder if I could do that in post. We'll just do this. Maybe in post there'll be stars shooting across.
That'd be so fun.
Highly unlikely though. But I did this just in case. There you go.
So let's talk about stories and how they keep us stuck or how they can liberate us.
Okay. Let's talk about stories. Oh, I have a story about a story.
I'd love to hear your story about a story. Am I getting on the story train?
Right, we're gonna go on the story train because I have stories about stories. So I have a story that I've been playing with lately that is essentially running through that some of the story that I should feel bad for some of my stories. So I have a story telling me that I should feel bad and feel guilty because I have these other stories. And I've been stalking it and watching it, and it's been fascinating to just see what's going on. And they've been stories. So the story I have around, I'm going to break this up. The stories, not the story about the stories, but the stories all have to do with the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And what other people might think of how I'm handling the pandemic, what their interpretation of it. I'm giving a lot of energy right now to what the proverbial they think I'm doing. Am I doing it right? Am I not doing it right? Am I being a good citizen? Am I being selfish? Like all of these stories I have around what other people think of my behavior.
So things like going to the grocery store or not leaving your house or leaving your house or wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, like those types of things.
Right, exactly. So for instance, wearing a mask, right? It was funny. So twice I've gone to the grocery store and took a mask. So this is over a couple weeks. So even right now, I'm like running a story going, I have to make sure that they understand that I didn't go to the grocery store back to back because that would be very selfish and irresponsible. So story folk, there you go. I'm acknowledging that you may have this story. So that's the story. And so, and I had it, so back to back, but just watching, like the first time I watched and paid attention to what all the other people were doing, and most of them weren't wearing masks. So I didn't wear it even though I had brought it with me. And yet this last time I went, people were wearing masks. Now nothing had really changed. Obviously the pandemic was still happening, but I wasn't set with what I believed enough that I wasn't being swayed by what was happening with other folk. That makes sense? So yeah, so then, so when I layer that, I now have a story that I am not on top of that. And the story overlaying it is that I clearly just can't be confident and secure in my own thoughts and what I need to do because I am, going by the whims of other people. And my story is that I should just know and wear my mask regardless. Right? And obviously, if I'm not having that confidence, then I'm somehow a bad person. And I'm not. I'm a confused person right now with what's going on out in the world.
It's a very confusing time.
So I don't know, maybe my story analogy, maybe now I'm making up a story, that the story that I just shared with you was not really a clear example of stories.
No, I hear the story. I can see it very clearly. So do you feel like the story or the story on top of the story is giving you energy or dampening your energy?
Oh, it's dampening it. Absolutely. It's taking away I mean, it takes going to the grocery store from being something that, although I should be cautious and, respectful, is becoming a whole ordeal. I couldn't go to the grocery store the other night. Like I was going to go in the evening, and the anxiety and the stress I brought up was just like, nope, not going to do it. So I had to wait. I mean, and for myself, that's just part of my own process with anxiety, but I knew I had to wait till the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next morning I was able to go. Still difficult as all heck, but easier. And it shouldn't be that hard. It's a trip to the grocery store. I've done it thousands of times. I wish, not my favorite thing to do on any day. And, it feels storyful. Storyful.
Mm.
That's
Full of stories. So what do you think would be helpful around the story? Like, do you want to shift the story? Do you want to put it back on its shelf and just be like, bye-bye? Do you want to keep stalking it? Like, what
would
be helpful?
I think right now for me, it's about just stalking it. It's about paying attention. I spend a lot of time just paying attention to my stories and see what activates them. Right? It's like, ooh, where'd this come from? And the awareness of knowing their stories.
Mm-hmm.
So even in the story, saying, "Hey, I'm in a story, yay!" But it was story that kept me, from switching the way I was living years ago, from 7 years ago. It was story. It was a story I had made up. It was a story I had put on other people. It was a story I had made up about them and what they thought, and a whole host of other things, but it was all story. And the fear and the story got so intertwined that it was just hard to see clear. But then there's that moment of truth, right? Mm. There's that moment where all of a sudden the truth is really, really clear. And you may resist it for a while. You may I don't like that truth. That truth sucks. I don't want to deal with that truth, right? So we can resist it. Mm-hmm. But there's, I truly think a lot of times we have these moments of truth. We have a time when we get to stand in our power and say, this is what's happening. This is the truth. And this is what is going to, and this is what I'm thinking, feeling, and doing right now.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I love about the truth is we don't have to like it. Like, it's just the truth. It's simple. We don't have to justify it or defend it. I often feel like I have to defend my stories. Even if I know that they're bullshit. Like, I still have this, like, I need to defend it because I've created it. Like, somehow it's still my baby.
Yeah. It's mine and I love it.
And one of the things I do love about stories, because I love stories. I think that stories are a lot of what give us life and drama. And I don't mean drama like drama. Although, yeah. But but the excitement in life, the arousal, the adrenaline rushes, like those things come from story, as well as our senses and like our experiences. And so I love myths and legends. Like, I love to have that aliveness come in. And one of the things I really appreciate about the Warrior Heart practice is that Heather Ash talks about like writing better stories. And she teaches about this as well, this idea of like sometimes on our way to getting to the truth, we just write better stories for a while. Or we get to the truth and we still write a better story because it's more fun. And to just be able to step outside of the stories, to know that we have a witness self that can witness the story and to not believe it. And so there's this joy and this playfulness, I think, in our ability to live unconditionally, is the freedom to step in and out of our stories, to be able to step into the story and live it wholeheartedly, and then step out and be like, oh yeah, and it's just a story. I know one of the hardest things for me the last few years is learning how to let go of my attachment to not just like the stuff that I want to let go of, like the bad stuff or the negative or heavy stuff, but also letting go of my attachment to the stories that are positive
Mhm.
or happy,
Yeah,
right? Because if we're trying to get to like total freedom, it's letting go of all of it.
I know, but those ones are really hard to let go of,
They're
right?
sometimes the hardest, right?
They're super hard. Is it so? It's this. Okay, and yes, it's the second agreement. Don't take anything personally from the 4 agreements. All right. So I'm all good with. Yep, I shouldn't take that personally when people are saying like things that are unkind or like that's clearly not true. That's on them. And then they say nice things about me sometimes. People do, and it's really lovely, and I feel all good and fuzzy inside. And then I catch myself and go, wait, I'm not, I'm taking that personally too. And it still has nothing to do with me. But I want it to like it's but it makes me feel good and it strokes my ego. So yeah, that for me is the hardest of the 4 agreements because, and I think it's in that case about not taking it's how do you not take things personally?
Mhm.
Clearly a student, I still am.
Apprentices we are.
As we are.
But it's true. Like there's this, I don't know, there's this place of just acknowledging that um that those things make me feel good. Like
Mhm.
I feel good when I receive compliments or um I get a good score on something. And can I step outside of it simultaneously? Like I want to be able to both enjoy it wholeheartedly
Mhm.
and be able to witness it without attachment. Like to be able to do both. I'm not there by any stretch of the
That's
imagination.
amazing. Tell me how you do that. Yeah, no. Tell me. Tell me your secrets.
But I am playing with what's possible. Like I know that that's possible. Like I've seen people do it. And so I'm like, okay, I know that this relationship with ourselves is a thing that people do. And so, yay, and stumbling along the way. One of the most important things I know that um, Don Miguel Jr. talks about is not making the 4 agreements the 4 conditions, because a lot of times people will take the 4 agreements and then they'll just be like, okay, here's a new set of rules that I have to live by. And I'm catching myself more and more. I've been doing a ton of reading while I've been um, in quarantine, and I'm watching myself read
Mhm.
in this really interesting way. Like my witness is watching me read and paying attention to when something gets stirred up in me around something an author is saying. So whether it's something that I'm excited or inspired about or something that I'm repulsed by, I'm
Mhm.
just watching my reaction on why I think that it should matter what they're saying. And paying attention to like what I'm putting stock in or not putting stock in and why I have attachments to whether they should be in an echo chamber with me or whether we're on like opposing sides of something. And I'm catching myself too having moments where I'm like completely in agreement and then completely not in agreement and completely in agreement and completely not in agreement. And just like watching that ping pong game almost of that.
Hmm. So
And the stories I'm telling about it.
it's interesting because I'm watching it. So I'm doing this weird thing in my head right now as I'm listening to you share with it, is that, and yet none of it matters.
None of it matters.
It's all just lies. No, it's so interesting. I wonder if sometimes this kind of digging deep, which is really interesting to do, and we get new things come up when we do it, um, isn't also though, not also though, but it's so this is where my brain is grabbing a hold of things and I'm not having words. Right? It's hard because I don't have the words to explain that when we're dealing with these concepts that seem they seem complicated, but I don't think they really are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our stories are, right, we can get a hold of them. I know I can. We get a hold of the story, and then we make it have to mean more. Like, does my having a story mean something deeper?
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly I'm attributing all of this meaning to something. And yet I'm just giving, it's just another story. So the meaning that I just gave it, that I have a story, and now I just have another story. So it becomes all of this. And I think that's why we have these interestingly fascinating discussions sometimes, because it becomes this layering of how the heck do we pull all of the stories off of each other?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do we pull our desire for unconditional living, right? To be fully present, to be aware with what's going on. How do we do that without getting ourselves buried in what it means or doesn't mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That making sense?
Yeah,
No?
totally.
Okay. Okay.
I feel like we're driving somewhere between Amarillo and Santa Fe,
Right? All right. I don't
drinking
know.
our Diet Cokes.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, there's so in the Toltec teachings, we talk about the Nagual and the Tonal,
Mhm.
and like the Nagual being the space that you can't describe
Right.
because it's beyond words, right? And it's the place of being in the divine, like
Oh.
being life. And then you have the Tanal, which is anything that we can describe and our experience in it. And to me, any amount of talking about any of it is always going to be in the Tanal because you're explaining it, right?
Mhm.
And then the sensing stuff, not always, but sometimes is in the Nagual because if we move beyond words, then theoretically we may be in that place of grace of being in the Nagual energy, which often to me feels like touches,
Okay.
like a moment, and then it's gone.
Mhm.
And so, you know, as we talk about the stories, as we talk about like excavating all of those and trying to, you know, let go of the meaning or whatever,
Mhm.
eventually we get to a place where we can't let go anymore. And I'm guessing my feeling sense is that that's the Nagual.
That's a wall. Oh, yes, there it is. But as soon as I try and say that's the Miguel, I'm back in the Tanal.
Exactly. The I mean, seriously, the clearest way for me, and I can't describe it. Like, if I can do my best to try and put it words together.
Hmm.
But on like being with my mom in the moment that she died, and
Yes.
then the weeks, not the whole time, I wasn't in it like the whole time, but a lot of the time after that, there were moments where I was with people and nothing mattered. And I was just like literally present in the moment. That was the place where stories didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And then every once in a while, it would start to drop in again. And I'd be like telling a story about the fact that I don't have a story. And I'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I'd take a breath and it would pull me back into the space. And I played there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And now I like try to access it again. And it's just like, it's not there. I'm sure it's there somewhere, but
Yeah.
it's different.
It's different. Yeah. Those moments, it's those spaces that we're gifted, right? Those moments of grace where all of a sudden something shifts for just those a brief time, you know. And I remember you in the Nagual. You know, I like that space, that time, you know. And I remember, you know, you're explaining your experience with it. And you know, it's just to be witness to was, I mean, you know, really, really beautiful and really cool. And it was just because, you know, you would use words and be like, oh, but what was really for me as an observer, as witness to your experience, it was just pure beauty. Like, it was just like, here she is, right? I could see it. And we didn't have to talk about it. It was just, the space that you were in. And, truly, it was just really cool to be witness and for the privilege of being in your space during that time. I look at, I akin it to, it's like, to touching the face of God, that some people say. It's about seeing the divine or being, there's no words. There's just not. But I think, everybody gets pieces of it, right? We get touches. We get moments of grace that come in, even in the midst of really, really difficult situations. Moments of grace come. And we feel the divine and we feel connected and we know it. We don't feel it, we know it. Mm-hmm. It's right there. I can't even say it feels good because there's no feeling to it. It's just,
yeah, it just is.
It just is. I remember, and I'll share this, and I don't know that I've actually ever shared this story with, it is not a story with anybody, ever. And I'll share it really briefly. But there was a moment in the, I want to say the second night, when they had, as part of the process, they had, I had stopped all of the medication I was on. And they hadn't restarted any of the supplemental yet because they have to give it space in between before they start you so it's effective. So I was in the, we'll say, ravages or the grips of a pretty, dark, really, really dark place that night. And I don't even know if there was room for story. Mm-hmm. Like, it was just consuming. It was all consuming. Every ounce of my body was on fire. My brain was on fire. It was pretty rough. And there was this, as I was staring into the ceiling, because there was no sleep. I mean, that was not a thing. I couldn't stop shaking, and it was just, And what happened, though, in that space where I felt so abandoned and alone, and still having, I think the story that was still running through my mind at that point was, how do I make this stop, right? So now I was up in Northern Ontario, and it was in the winter, and there was snow everywhere, right? But I had this, like, you need to run from this building, right? So it was that same fear that was still there, like, this is not okay. You need to run, right? You need to, this is not good, right? And I don't think that's unlike probably other people that go through similar experiences. So I don't mean it that, but for me, that's where I was in. And the point I'm trying to get to is, in that moment, as I was staring up at the ceiling, I felt the nurse that was with me came in and sat on the bed and held my hand. Because at that point, they weren't able to do anything else to help. And he held my hand. Remember, his name was Jan. And I felt in that moment, for the splittest of seconds, the briefest of seconds, that it was going to be okay. And I felt the grace of the divine, of God, of spirit, and whatever, you perceive, and whatever, is your being. I felt it. And then it was gone. Mm-hmm. And I never felt that before. And people talk about when there are those places of, of such great despair, and an angel appears. Mm-hmm. Something happens that gives you that little piece you need, however small, to get through to the next second. Mm-hmm. And that's what that was. And then it was gone, and then I was back into shake. But it's magical. It's a gift that we're given It really is. It's just interesting to think about that because I've never, yeah, I don't think I've ever spoken about that to anybody, and I, haven't really even thought about it a lot. But I remember the touch of his hand, and I remember what the light that came through me in that moment. Mm.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Ooh, wow. Okay then, have some sipping of tea. It's a time for tea. Now uneasy laughter as I come back. Woo.
Comic relief. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about Cake Day and for talking to me today about death and fear and living unconditionally. It's been such an honor to sit and drink tea and eat cake on this glorious day.
It's beautiful out there too. The sun is shining. It's a gorgeous day. So thank you for spending this time with me.